Manuela let out a deep, heavy sigh, her gaze fixed on the rain that blurred the view through the window. It was the end of July, with a promise of clear skies and sunshine, if not for the stifling heat. Her disappointment made her glance at the large round clock on the wall. The hands were pointing to almost 6 a.m, signaling that it was almost time to rush to catch the bus. While she could shield herself from the rain with an umbrella, there was no shield against gray days and her sinking mood. She took a sip of lukewarm coffee, quickly washed the cup, and headed for the door. The soft sound of a door opening, followed by slow, dragging footsteps, reached her ears. "Emanuela, are you ready?" he asked her grandmother, appearing in the hallway. The older woman's eyes were half closed and sleepy. She was wrapped in a bathrobe decorated with blue flowers, a Mother's Day gift Manuela had given her last year, now worn out from frequent washing. Mrs. Castro, now retired for several years, had taken on the responsibility of managing the house since the tragic accident that took the lives of Manuela and Diego's parents. In her old age and with her health deteriorating, she had refused help. "Yes, Grandma," Emanuela replied from the hallway, putting on her old autumn leather jacket. Did you eat something, dear?" The elderly woman frowned, crossing her arms over her chest, watching her granddaughter as she tied her sneakers. "Yes, Grandma," Emanuela assured her, more out of habit than honesty. She rationalized that small white lies were acceptable if they helped reassure her grandmother. "Today we have a big wedding at the hotel, a banquet for 100 guests. Maybe I'll bring some treats for you and Diego," as she suggested. Mrs. Castro promptly dismissed the idea with a wave, showing her objection to the entire conversation. She was a traditional woman who firmly believed that anything Manuela brought home from work, besides her salary, was equivalent to stealing. Manuela laughed and said that the police might show up because of a few sandwiches. Her grandmother retorted with disapproval, "And if they do show up?" Mrs. Castro's former job as an accountant in a kindergarten had taught her a strong sense of integrity. Despite her diligence and competence, by retirement age, the management had politely asked her to step aside to make room for younger workers. Attempts by Mrs. Castro to find another job were met with disappointment. Her age became an obstacle, overshadowing her vast experience. She tried to supplement the family income with odd jobs, but the physical and emotional toll did more damage to her health than the financial benefits they brought. Manuela was determined to avoid these tragic ends, which she considered unnecessary sacrifices. She insisted that her grandmother deserved to enjoy her retirement like any woman her age. At 22, Manuela took on the responsibility of ensuring her grandmother's well-being. Manuela assumed the financial burden of her small family. Grandma, did you know that school is closed today?" "They're in quarantine," Emanuela reminded her, her voice highlighting her younger brother's situation. "Let him sleep," the grandmother said as she headed out the door. She was sure that her deeply religious grandmother was saying a silent prayer for her. After a kiss on the cheek and a warm goodbye from her grandmother, Manuela made her way down the dimly lit hallway and out into the rain-soaked street. Manuela worked as a housekeeper at a renowned luxury hotel. Although she wished she could aim for positions like receptionist, she still lacked the specialized training needed. However, this was the industry she was determined to venture into, studying from afar. Indeed, Manuela's skills and commitment already made her a deserving candidate for promotion. She secretly dreamed of one day managing her own charming hotel, a place where her family could work and live comfortably, a refreshing change from their current apartment. The salary was decent, which was always a bonus. Her main clients were influential people who often left generous tips for the young housekeeper. The hotel was frequented by politicians, businessmen, celebrities, and other prominent figures, including those arriving with unidentified partners. Interestingly, this latter group gave the largest tips, possibly as silent payment. She also appreciated the flexible hours and the possibility of swapping shifts with her co-workers in case of emergencies. But the job was physically and mentally exhausting. Every penny she earned was the result of hard work. Not all guests were grateful, and not all employees were supportive. Manuela's resilience and diplomatic demeanor became her strengths. They allowed her to maintain her composure in unpleasant situations and find solutions even in the most challenging circumstances, both with her coworkers and while interacting with clients. Manuela's diplomatic skills were frequently tested by the intrusive hotel manager, Breno. It seemed he had made it his mission to irritate her as much as possible, patrolling the hotel tirelessly. Today, when she entered the communal locker room, he approached her with indifference and confidence. "A good morning, Manuela," Breno said, smoothing his hair and running his hands down her back. The touch sent a shiver down her spine, and she momentarily froze near her locker. "Hi, Mr. Breno," as she murmured, hiding her discomfort. "Why so formal?" "It's just us here," he said with a suggestive tone. "Go ahead and put on your uniform. The workday is about to start. I'd hate to have to dock your pay, though sometimes I don't mind." He laughed, feigning interest in her locker. It was clear he had entered expecting a provocative response from the housekeeper. Manuela gritted her teeth, suppressing the flood of unsaid words she had for him. And she had many reasons to be angry. From the first day, Manuela's light hair, cinnamon-colored eyes, and turned-up nose had caught Breno's attention. However, instead of making his advances and gracefully accepting rejection, he used his position as manager to impose his unwanted interest, making inappropriate comments and trying to touch her on her back or knees at every opportunity. He even went as far as giving her an inappropriate pat and making lewd remarks about the skirt of her uniform. Manuela had learned to endure Breno's behavior and unwanted attention. What else could she do? Retaliate and risk losing her job and salary? No, Manuela couldn't. She also wasn't willing to settle for a cashier job with a third of her salary. She believed that with patience and perseverance, she would eventually progress in her career and escape Breno's dominance. Besides, she wanted to pamper her little brother Diego with the latest toys and buy new essentials for her grandmother. Manuela also feared the potential consequences for her co-workers if she revealed Breno's behavior, as, all too often, it's the woman who ends up being blamed. If he harassed her, they would certainly say that Manuela must have been flirting or seeking a promotion. Or worse, he might dismiss her claims as fabrications seeking attention. Once, when Manuela tried to oppose Breno's relentless advances by responding to his not-so-subtle hint about staying late to check her bed-making skills in a hotel suite, she said, Mr. Breno, I'm not interested in what you're implying, nor do I have the time or inclination to engage in any kind of personal relationship." "I'm not proposing a relationship," he replied, unperturbed. "We're adults, Manuela, and there's nothing wrong with having a close relationship with coworkers. Trust me, it could significantly change your life. Who knows, maybe the receptionist position is about to open up. I could give you a good opportunity. Or do you plan to clean bathrooms indefinitely?" "No, thank you. I can manage on my own," Manuela replied. "You're dismissing this too quickly, Manuela. Soon you'll understand that everything has a price in this world." Sometimes, Manuela's resistance triggered Breno's anger, resulting in a barrage of problems. He reprimanded her for invisible dust particles in the rooms she had cleaned with utmost care. On one occasion, he scolded her in front of the entire team for being overly friendly with a guest. "Know your place, young lady. Who do you think you are to speak to our esteemed guests that way? Remember, you're just a housekeeper," Breno scolded. He mistakenly assumed she was flirting when the guest had merely asked for directions to the gym. Despite the evident misunderstanding, arguing was futile. Lately, he had been closely monitoring her schedule, making sure she neither left early nor arrived late. He even threatened to fire her. Fortunately, the ill-intentioned manager was just one of the few problems in the work environment. Despite the weight of cleaning supply carts and the pressure to arrange rooms perfectly in record time, like some sort of military training, Manuela quickly changed into her uniform, doing her best to ignore Breno's lecherous glances. She hurried out of the locker room once again and immersed herself in the daily work routine, which always made time pass quickly. Manuela Vittoria from reception called, peeking into the kitchen during lunchtime. "Could you check if the new employee cleaned the outdoor pool area? They had a party there last night, but the weather is improving." Guests might want to use the pool. We need to make sure it's clean and ready. No problem, I'm on it, Manuela nodded. And the other girls? Did Mr. Breno send them on any tasks? For now, it's just you. All right then, Manuela responded. She quickly finished arranging the dishes and headed towards the pool area. The hotel had 2 pools, one indoor and one outdoor. The previous night, there had been a Hawaiian-themed party at the outdoor pool. As Manuela made her way to the pool, she picked up half-empty coconut shells and pineapple rinds, remnants of the delicious cocktails from the night before. Approaching the pool, she noticed the sun was finally beginning to peek through the clouds. She headed to the storage room to grab some trash bags when a strange sound caught her attention. It was a splash, as if something or someone had fallen into the water. She turned towards the sound but saw nothing at first. Just as she was about to look away, she spotted something struggling in the water. Her heart sank. It was a young boy struggling to stay afloat. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, panicking as adrenaline took over. Without a second thought, Manuela ran towards the pool and dove into the water. The icy coldness of the water was a shock, but all she could focus on was reaching the child. She wasn't a strong swimmer, and every meter was a struggle, making her realize how crucial her quick response was. Once she reached the boy, she saw with horror that he was no longer moving. He seemed to have lost his strength. Manuela grabbed his clothes, keeping his face above water, and began swimming back with great difficulty. It was slow and tough, but she was gradually approaching the edge of the pool. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, either from the weight or the intense fear. When they reached the edge, Manuela pulled the boy out of the water and laid him down. She put her ear to his chest and her heart sank as she realized he wasn't breathing. Desperately, she began shouting for help, but the pool area was deserted. The only sounds were the sun and music, not the frantic cries of a woman. The CPR training she had received seemed like a distant memory. She didn't know what to do. She should seek help, but she knew every second was precious. Manuela calmed herself, forcing back the tears that threatened to spill. She started performing chest compressions, desperately trying to expel the water from his lungs. Then she began giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. All other thoughts faded as she focused solely on saving the child's life. Suddenly, the miracles she had silently prayed for occurred. The boy began to cough, expelling the water that had filled his lungs. His eyes opened, clear and blue like the morning sky. He looked at Manuela with fear and confusion. Then his breathing started to return in irregular gasps, and he burst into tears of fear. To Manuela's surprise, she found herself crying too, but her tears were of joy and relief. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said through her tears, pulling the boy into a comforting embrace. "You're safe now, everything will be okay." The boy clung tightly to her shirt, his small body trembling against hers. Soon after, an ambulance called by the hotel staff arrived quickly and took the child to the hospital. For Manuela, who was still shaken by the shock of the situation, her day was far from over. Hours later, as Manuela was changing out of her work uniform, Breno burst into the staff break room, panting. "What happened out there, nurse?" Breno demanded. Manuela, who had changed her clothes, was caught off guard. She was quietly sipping a calming cup of tea, scented with lemon. "What do you mean, Mr. Breno?" she asked, holding her cup so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Where do you think you're going?" he said, confused. "Do you think you did your job well today, Manuela? Because I'm paying you to let a child almost drown while you're on duty." Manuela understood the root of her boss's fury. Earlier, the higher-ups had spoken to the manager about the housekeepers, Vittoria and Bianca, who had been quick to share the latest gossip. Apparently, the near accident of the day coincided with a surprise visit from the owner of the entire hotel chain, Eduardo Martins. He came to evaluate the staff's performance. According to what Bianca heard, Eduardo was not pleased with the state of the hotel. He reprimanded the manager for his negligence, including the fact that the pool should have been supervised by the staff, but Breno had assigned them to other tasks. Manuela felt no sympathy for Breno, nor did she take pleasure in his predicament. Instead, a strange numbness enveloped her, likely as a result of the day's distressing events. "I'm done for today," Manuela replied calmly. "And what about the third floor?" "The other girls are taking care of it. They said they can manage without me." "Who gave you permission to make these decisions? Do you think you're in charge now?" he retorted. "You know what, Manuela? I'm tired of your disobedience," he said, leaning in and lowering his voice. "So tired that I'm seriously considering ending your employment." "Why?" "For saving that child." Manuela shot back, her voice rising in indignation. "Calm down, Manuela. The details of what happened aren't clear yet," he said, patronizingly stroking her knee. "However, I'm willing to give you one more chance." "No, thank you," she retorted. "Are you sure?" he asked with a sarcastic smile. "What if I suggest that the boy fell into the pool due to your negligence? After all, you were the only one there. Did anyone see you pull him out of the water?" "No, they didn't. And the parents have significant influence. They're investigating the matter." "Are you trying to blackmail me?" Manuela interrupted. "Blackmail? How serious you are." "No, Manuela, I'm just proposing the most sensible solution. I hope you make the right choice." "I will," Manuela nodded. She placed her half-empty cup on the table. The tea, once comforting, had lost its appeal. She stood up and looked him directly in the eyes. "If being fired is the worst that can happen, so be it," she retorted. With that, she left the room, determined not to return to work the next day. She had had enough. Of course, she could report Breno's behavior, but there were reasons that made her hesitate. Eduardo Martins, owner of a successful hotel chain, led a busy life. Managing a large enterprise was demanding, but nothing compared to the complexities of his personal life. Despite being a successful man with many admirers, his interest in relationships had waned. 3 years ago, a car accident took the life of his beloved wife. Since then, he has thrown himself into work, seeking refuge from the pain and emptiness left by his loss. Work became more than just a paycheck for Eduardo. It became a sanctuary where he could escape the void left by Anna's departure. Last week, Eduardo was deeply involved in inspecting one of his hotels. He was not satisfied with what he discovered: numerous deficiencies, gaps, and suspicious activities indicating possible dirty play. The situation was alarming, but Eduardo chose not to take impulsive measures to address it, preferring to thoroughly analyze the data before making any decisions. As dawn broke, Eduardo was already in the hotel lobby. Vittoria, the receptionist, greeted him with her usual smile and friendliness. "Good morning, Mr. Martins," she said cheerfully.
"Good morning, Vitria."
"How is the reception? Everything in order?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Everything is in order," she replied with enthusiasm and a radiant smile. Eduardo walked further into the hotel premises. "How is the boy? What is Miss Souza's update?" he inquired. Vittoria hesitated briefly before sharing the update. "The boy is recovering well, and his parents are grateful for the hotel team's swift action in saving him. They expressed special thanks to Mr. Breno for his timely intervention." "So he is a knight in shining armor, isn't he?" Eduardo reflected. "That's strange. We spoke yesterday, and he barely mentioned the incident." Vittoria remained silent, avoiding Eduardo's gaze and pretending to be focused on her computer screen. Eduardo felt a knot in his stomach, realizing something was wrong. He considered pressing her further, but Breno's timely entrance into the lobby diverted his attention. "Vittoria, call the head of security to meet me in my office," Eduardo instructed the receptionist before heading to the elevator. After reviewing another set of security reports and uncovering additional minor violations, Eduardo was convinced of the need for a thorough and systematic investigation. Once he set aside his immediate tasks, Eduardo turned his attention to Breno. Mr. Breno, you were quite modest about your heroic act yesterday, he approached kindly. You acted like a hero and didn't even bother to make it known. I would like to express my sincere gratitude for your quick and courageous action during the emergency. Breno was momentarily taken aback by the unexpected gratitude. Anyone in my position would have done the same. That's exactly what I told the boys' parents. It's fortunate you were present when needed. However, I hope our team remains vigilant in their designated roles so that such heroic interventions will not be necessary, Eduardo commented. I apologize for this oversight. Actually, I was in the process of dismissing one of our employees. She did not fit well in the role and was ignoring our protocols, he explained. Eduardo was surprised by the revelation. He knew that dismissals were sometimes necessary, but it was still a significant step in business and should be handled with care. Next, Eduardo and the head of security reviewed the security camera footage from the past few days. Eduardo's face grew increasingly somber, his brows furrowed even more. He not only found validation for his suspicions, but also came across something completely unexpected. Mr. Cruz, the footage of the incident in the open pool area yesterday? Eduardo asked. I'm sorry to inform you, sir, Cruz replied, lowering his head in apology. We were in the process of replacing some defective cameras. I notified Mr. Breno on the same day. Unfortunately, we have no recording of that day. I understand. Meanwhile, Vittoria, the receptionist, immediately noticed when Breno approached. He was questioning her about the questions Eduardo had asked earlier. You didn't say much, Mr. Breno, she retorted, losing her composure. Remember that oversharing can get you into trouble. Is that clear? Breno warned with a chilly tone. And make sure to pass that message along to the others. Sure, he's the owner, but you wouldn't want to get into trouble, would you? At that moment, Vittoria received a call from the security office. When she answered, she heard Eduardo's voice. She cast a nervous glance at Breno, who was staring at her. Yes, I understand. I'll be there soon, she said before entering the office. His last words echoed in her mind, think twice before doing anything foolish. Several days later, Manuela was sitting in the kitchen with her family, drinking hot tea and discussing her day, when a gentle knock sounded at the door. Upon opening it, she was surprised to find a tall man with dark hair standing there, dressed in an expensive suit. Can I help you? Manuela asked, aware of her own voice. Her brother peeked out from behind her, curious. I believe I'm here to see you, the visitor replied, looking a bit unsure. Oh my God. Finally, a man in a suit. No matter what he's asking, just say yes. He seems like the perfect fiancé. Manuela's grandmother couldn't contain her excitement, clapping her hands enthusiastically. Manuela's face turned red with embarrassment. Sorry, please don't mind her. She loves to joke around, she apologized to the visitor. It's all right, he reassured with a laugh. Manuela's grandmother was known for teasing Manuela's introverted nature, taking every opportunity to embarrass her in public. It was all in good spirit, as she only worried that Manuela was so absorbed in her work that she had little time for personal matters. The visitor, Eduardo, found the situation amusing, recognizing to himself that his attire did make him look like a groom. Just as Manuela was about to ask if he had the wrong address, he said, You must be Manuela, right? After she confirmed, he introduced himself as the new HR manager for the hotel and mentioned that he was there on the hotel owner's orders. Without further ado, he informed Manuela about the recent events at the hotel, leaving her deeply concerned. I'm aware that you were unjustly fired, he revealed, catching her off guard. But how do you know that? Manuela asked. That's not important, he dismissed her question, wrapped in a whirlwind of emotions. Manuela stared at the floor, lost in thought. The silence was soon broken by Eduardo. Why didn't you speak up about it? He asked. After a pause, Manuela finally spoke. Well, first of all, I just wanted to get away from everything related to the hotel. It was an emotional reaction, perhaps, but I had had enough. Besides, it would be my word against the manager's. I didn't want to cause more problems. Eduardo didn't need to ask all those questions, he already had all the answers to his doubts. He understood that Manuela had tried to protect her colleagues from any retaliation that might arise from expressing her complaints. An anonymous tip from a hotel maid had confirmed all the insidious events. Manuela's main concern was not to create problems for the hard-working team that depended on the hotel for their livelihood. Changing the subject, after a moment of silence, Eduardo steered the conversation to lighter topics. After a few minutes of friendly conversation, he took his leave, making sure not to extend his visit. Manuela decided to take some time off work to focus on her studies, as the exams were approaching. Her grandmother, however, couldn't resist seizing the opportunity with the handsome visitor, much to Manuela's amusement. Dear Manuela, he was a great opportunity. There was something really special about that man. Grandma, seriously, what was I supposed to do? Invite him out? Manuela laughed at the idea. Well, why not? There's nothing wrong with a woman taking the initiative. All right, Grandma, if I see him again, I'll make sure to do just that, Manuela joked, relaxed. A few days later, when Manuela returned home from an errand, she found the house unusually quiet. Her grandmother and her younger brother Diego were not there, and her grandmother's phone was missing. Her confusion was soon clarified by a note left on the table. The man in the suit came back and took us to the hotel. A wave of anxiety washed over Manuela as she tried to piece together what might have led to this situation. Could it be Breno's doing again? He seemed relentless in his schemes. Without wasting a minute, Manuela called a taxi and headed to the hotel. Upon arriving, she quickly spotted Vittoria at the reception, wearing a grin from ear to ear. Vittoria, have you seen my grandmother and brother? Manuela's words were filled with worry. Vittoria's smile faltered upon noticing Manuela's concerned expression. Wait, what? I thought you were involved in the plan. Go to the restaurant. Hurrying to the restaurant, Manuela found her grandmother and Diego already seated at a table. Their faces were glowing with joy. Before she could question them, she was warmly greeted by Eduardo, who guided her to join them at the table. Please sit down, Eduardo indicated an empty chair. Your grandmother told me you were running. Manuela, with a confused expression, asked. Can someone tell me what's going on? At that moment, Eduardo gave a small snap of his fingers, and to Manuela's surprise, Breno approached them. However, he was not dressed in his usual manager attire but in a waiter's uniform, placing menus on the table. Welcome to the hotel restaurant. What would you like to drink while you decide on your meals? Breno announced professionally. Catching Manuela off guard, their gazes met as the encounter settled in. It's good to see you again, Eduardo gave a glance toward Breno, giving him a nod. I'll let you look at the menu. Let me know when you're ready to order, said Breno before moving to another part of the restaurant to attend to other customers. Manuela watched them for a moment and then turned her attention back to Eduardo. Seeing her confused expression, he decided to reveal his true identity. Manuela, he began, I apologize for any confusion. My name is Eduardo Martins. In fact, I am the owner of this hotel chain. As this new information began to sink in, Eduardo started recounting what had happened since their last meeting. He explained that he had conducted a personal investigation into the hotel's management, revealing Breno's transgressions. Mr. Breno never expected me to dig so deep into the hotel's security footage. The recordings revealed that he wasn't present during the incident at the pool, although they did capture you walking in that direction. Although the incident itself wasn't recorded, detailed conversations with each staff member were enough to piece together the truth. Manuela looked at Breno, who was now attending to other tables with his mind elsewhere. Eduardo noticed her expression and anticipated her next question. I know you're probably wondering why Breno is here. Initially, I was furious and planned to fire him. I even considered reporting him to the Hotel and Restaurant Association, which would essentially bar him from working in the industry again. He paused for emphasis before continuing. But it turns out you, inadvertently, gave him a second chance. Seeing the confusion on Manuela's face, Eduardo realized he needed to clarify his previous statement. He begged for a second chance, promising to change his behavior. My first reaction was pure rage. I wanted him to pay for his actions as severely as possible. Eduardo paused, his eyes briefly drifting to his clasped hands. I changed my mind. My conversations with the people he worked with convinced me. They had nothing but praise for his kindness and fairness. So I decided to give Breno a severe punishment, one I thought you would accept. He was given one last chance to redeem himself, starting his career over from scratch. As you can see, he chose to accept. There was a reflective silence after Eduardo's revelation. Eventually, he broke the silence. Manuela, while it was important to explain all this to you, that's not the only reason I brought you here today. Suddenly, the entire hotel staff seemed to appear out of nowhere, lining up in front of them. Eduardo turned to face the crowd and announced, Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce your new manager, Miss Manuela Castro. Applause and smiles filled the room. As the applause subsided, Eduardo handed Manuela a piece of paper. This is your contract. I encourage you to read it. And just to be clear, I don't accept a no as an answer. Manuela was absolutely shocked by the sudden turn of events. She blinked, sure that she would wake up from this unbelievable dream at any moment. Her mind was in a whirlwind, trying to process the reality that she, Manuela Castro, had just been offered the position of hotel manager. Her brother Diego seemed to be reflecting on her state of shock, his eyes practically popping out of their sockets, shining with a mix of disbelief and joy. Manuela looked at the piece of paper in her hand. Her ticket to a new beginning was not only a professional achievement, it was a validation of her worth and a stand against the unjust actions she had been subjected to. It seemed surreal, a complete reversal of the despair that had marked her life in recent weeks. As Manuela looked around, absorbing the happy faces, the genuine applause, and the encouraging gestures from her future colleagues, she realized this wasn't a dream, it was reality, a wonderful reality she had only ever imagined. Breno approached the table with a bottle of champagne in hand. He began to pour it into glasses. Despite all the animosity Manuela had felt toward him, she couldn't help but feel a bit of compassion. He had once been her superior, always nitpicking, criticizing, and reprimanding. But now he was in a position to serve her, her subordinate. The tables had truly turned. Thank you, Breno, she said, acknowledging his service and catching him off guard with her unexpected gratitude. I'm really sorry for everything, Manuela. I hope to make amends in the future. Eduardo watched the exchange with admiration, witnessing the grace and compassion with which Manuela handled the situation. It confirmed his decision. He knew without a doubt that he had made the right choice in appointing Manuela as the new manager. A year passed, and the hotel entered a new era under Manuela Castro's dedicated leadership. She was not only a perceptive and committed manager, but also a kind-hearted person who created an environment of comfort and happiness for all guests. Manuela proved to be an exceptional and energetic manager. She had a personal interest in ensuring each guest's satisfaction. Having started from scratch, she understood the importance of treating employees with empathy and considering their circumstances. She was familiar with each employee's background and experiences. Manuela always made it a point to interact with them on an equal footing while handling daily tasks. The once daunting encounters with her feared former manager were now a thing of the past. Breno had become more subdued, often choosing to remain silent whenever he crossed paths with Manuela. Afraid of team meetings, he simply observed and listened attentively, managing only a small smile. As the months passed, Eduardo found himself increasingly drawn to Manuela. What began as business visits gradually transformed into a desire to spend more time in her company. He was deeply attracted to this bold young woman who had turned the hotel's fortunes around. One day, Eduardo, unable to contain his emotions any longer, decided to confess his feelings to Manuela. When he arrived at the hotel, his heart pounded in his chest as he made his way to her office. Manuela, he began, his words faltering due to nerves, I'm not sure how to express this. I made a promise to myself not to break a certain rule, but it seems you're making me do just that. You've won my heart and become incredibly important to me. I can't hide my feelings any longer. He held his breath, waiting for her response. A sigh of relief escaped him when he heard her confess that she also had feelings for him. A wave of happiness enveloped them, and in a tender gesture, they drew closer than ever, culminating in a gentle kiss. For years, Manuela had only known the love of her grandmother and brother, but now she realized there was another person who held a special place in her heart. 6 months later, the hotel hosted a grand wedding celebrating the union of Eduardo and Manuela. Unexpectedly, the creative mind behind the special meals and event activities was none other than Breno. He worked diligently to ensure everything went smoothly. Manuela was pleasantly surprised by this change in Breno. During the designated time for speeches, Breno requested the opportunity to say a few words. He approached the microphone modestly, still dressed in his work uniform. The crowd fell silent as they watched him. He lowered his gaze for a moment, gathering his thoughts before speaking. Manuela, you have been an example of humility. You have taught me so much. I've learned that no matter how terrible a person might be, if they're fortunate enough to have someone like you in their life, they can always count on a second chance. Then, turning to Eduardo, Breno continued. Eduardo, as much as I'd like to say you're a lucky man, that wouldn't be accurate. Who else deserves this more than you? Congratulations to both of you. The audience was moved by his sincere words and erupted into applause. Breno approached the newlyweds, shaking their hands and displaying a genuine smile. This marked a new beginning for Breno as well, free from prejudice and intimidation. Manuela enjoyed her bustling life. Sometimes, she looked at her extended family and felt a sense of wonder. Everyone seemed so familiar, as if they had lived their entire lives side by side, united. Shortly after the wedding. And if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, like, comment and share this story.